Okay, so last lecture we focused on the graphic objects, mainly on the push buttons. We talk about the maintain push button and momentary push button, right? So those are the two components we use to change the PLC tag value, right? You can see here on the left-hand side, right? The purpose or the type of the object is to change the tag value. And today we're going to start to talk about the other objects. The first one is the multi-state indicator. So if you look at the purpose of the type, it's different. This object, as the name implied, right, it's just an indicator. It doesn't change the tag value on the PLC. Instead, it will to let the operator to see, to view the changes, right? So as the name imply, it has a different states, right? So that's what we need to focus on. So after we finish this object, we're gonna move on to the other two objects related to the numbers. So one is called numerical display. The other one is numerical display is the same as indicator, right? To view the value. And then on the opposite, similar to the maintain and the momentary push button, we also have a button related to the numerical. So numerical input enable, that's the name for the object, right? So let's start with the multi-state indicator. So that's supposed to be here. Okay, so with multi-state indicator, same as before, if you remember, with the property windows, it has different tabs, right? So there are two of them are very almost the same for all the objects. One is called general, the other one is called common, right? If you remember what we talked about last lecture, all right? So let's look at the general, right? Underneath the general tab. So there's a property called the states setting, number of the states, right? So in the moment you will see a demo. So that's where you set up how many states you want to associate, you want to set up with this indicator, right? Multi-state, right? So that means it could be 2 states or could be more than 2, right? So that's obvious, but with the PLC, you will notice they should be connected into different type of tag, right? If you have 2 states, you normally connect to a Boolean tag. Of course, you can also connect to double integer, but normally, right? Normally for Boolean tag, that best suitable for these 2 states, because that's what Boolean tags for, right? But when you need more than 2 states for the indicator, you must use the din tag, right? The Boolean tag doesn't cut for this situation, right? So we haven't talked about on the double integer tag on the PLC yet, but you know that's just represent a number, right? So right after this, we can go to the PLC side, right, to look at that. So like I mentioned, right, so in this course, I asked you to set up at least 2 different properties. One in the general, which is the number of the states. The other, of course, is the tag connection, right? So indicator on there. So underneath the connections. So that's just the 2 basic setup. But if you look at on the states, right, because you want to set up each state match to different value of the tag, right? So within the state tab, you need to set up the color and also the value associated with that, right? So right now you're seeing on the on this slide a example from that's the game. If you remember we can even later, if you want, you can even use PLC to program to play a tic-tac-toe game, right? So as you can see on here, right? So for each spot on the board on the chessboard, right? You want to have at least 3 states, right? So that's the situation with tic-tac-toe, right? So because you have 2 players, one is you can use the red color to represent that. The other player, you can use the black to represent the 2 different colors. But there also a situation, there's no players occupy that particular spot, right? So that's the situation. You obviously need more than 2, right? So that's where you want to set up the states as 3, and also you want to set up the states with 3 different values, right? So I think yeah, I think I can do a demo at this point. Okay, so with multi-state indicator, we used this object before, right? So if you remember, we use the multi-state indicator for the pilot light, right? Let me see here. Yeah, so this is the program associated with this, right? So this button correspond to the this PB. I need to make sure because I used the same tag name. Remember, I had that mistake before. Yeah, I think that's the one we are using. So right now I'm gonna start the test display, right? So the test display already started, right? So if when I press the button, right? Oh no, I made that mistake again. Okay, let me see. That's here. That's underneath the main program. That's so yeah. You can see this is my mistake on here, right? So in the lab, you probably also very easily to make the same mistake, right? So remember that they have different scope, different program, right? So you need to match up. I think that's the one. Yeah. So that's the one we're looking at, right? So you can see here, this is a maintain the push button. It's being pressed, the pilot light turn on. Before we use this to represent a pilot light, right? So that's backlight, all right? So if I stop here, you can see the properties of this object. This is multi-state indicator property, and underneath here is a number of the states I set up as a 2, and then there's state 0 and state 1 represent the pilot off and on, right? You can also set up caption. I didn't set up that, right? So over here, to differentiate, I just need to change maybe the shape, because I want to demonstrate the tic-tac-toe, right? Yeah, we'll just use a square box to represent the, you know what, maybe I should keep that into circle. Apply, we'll keep that. We'll keep this circle to represent pilot light, right? So over here, I'm going to start to create another multi-state indicator, right? So if you remember, we can move the cursor to find the object on here, right? So that's the tooltip to tell you this is the multi-state indicator. So then I can start to draw the rectangle on here, right? So once you start to draw the rectangle on here, the property window open. So again, the default is 4, right? So if you click this pull down, you can see here, if you move the slider, it's all the way, I think it's not necessary, all the way up to 2000, right? They have 2000 states available for you. I do not think that's necessary, right? So now I'm going to set up at 3, right? So once I have the number of 3 in there, if you go into the states tab on here, right? So maybe I can zoom in a little bit to let you to have a better look on here. Just give me a minute. Okay. I hope this will make the display, the screen on your side is better, right? So this is the object, this is the window, right? So we want to have 3 different states. So for example, this is what I want to represent the tic-tac-toe, right? So state 0, if I want to match up with value 0, right? I don't need to change that. Of course, you can change it any number you want, but I'll just accept the default. So with the value 0, I want to represent this spot is empty, right? Nothing set up, no, not player 1, not player 2, right? It's also just a blank spot. So you can see that's the color, right? I set up the back color as white, right? So you can see that with state 1, the default, the value is 1, right? The default color is blue. I want to change it to red, right? To represent one of the player, right? You can see that's red. And then state 2 represent the default value is 2, right? So like I said, if you want, you could change, but I'll just accept the default value. If you apply, that's a black color, right? So now you can have 3 different states represent different colors. Then on the connection, I cannot connect to the push button anymore, right? So because that's a Boolean tag. Right now we have 3 different states, right? So I already create those new tags in the program. One is called value A. So this one is a double integer tag. All right, in a moment I can show you on that. I can just set up this object to associate with this tag value A. So once I click OK, I set up this object property. Right? No, that's a different object. So I forgot to deselect, right? So now I can move in a little bit. This side on here, okay. Now if maybe I can start to have a bigger screen, all right? So then you can have the whole operation. Just give me a minute. I need to resize my screen out here. Okay, so we already set up on the HMI side, all right? So now we go back to PLC. With PLC, we need to go to here, lab 1. So remember, if I can show you again, remember for the connection, I set up to the program called lab1.value_a, right? So that's what I set up. So that's where the value it is. Right now you can see here. So if I move the slider, you can see the value A, the type, the data type. Data type is DIN, right? Represent a double integer, right? So the default value is 0. So now I'm going to click on the HMI to test display. So once I click on here, you can see because the current value right now is 0. So that's why you see the white the color on there, right? So now I can start to change the value on here, right? So for example, if I change it to value 1, supposed to be red color, right? You can see here, red color, right? So far, nothing different from the pilot line. But now with double integer, I can set up value 2, right? With value 2, you can see that change color, right, to black. So that's the function with the multi-state indicator, right? Depends on what you want to use this object to represent. If you want to represent a Boolean, then you only have 2 different colors, right? But with double integer, you could have more than 2, right? So now I want to show you here. Remember I said the state 2, the default value is 2, right? For example, I want to change the value, change it to set up match to the value 10, right? Set up on 10, then test again. You will see here there's an error because right now the PLC side, the value is 2, right? That's what we set up before. But on your multi-state indicator, you don't have match up the state with the value of 2, right? We just changed it from 2 to 10, right? So that's why you see a error pop up. So that means the value problem, right? So this is just something I want to demonstrate this function. So now if I change the value to 10, which I already changed that on the setting, you can see now the error is gone, right? We got the black color, right? So I just want you to realize with the match value, you don't have to accept the default. You can change as you want with the your program, right? So let's go back to here. Yeah, you can set up to 2000, and also the error state is displayed when the runtime, when the indicator connection does not have one situation, you don't have a tag associated, or I already demonstrated that the tag connection value does not match one of the configured states, right? Remember that we used to have a value 2, if I change it to 3 and change it to 10, it doesn't match, right? That's where the error show up. Okay, this slide talk about the go-to display. Let's talk about it. Yeah, so it's very easy, right? So easy setup. I only ask you to set up the 2 properties, right? So one of them is under is the caption under the label, right? So if you go to the object under the tab of label, there's a caption, right? So that's where you want, you can see here, this is a go to display button. You want to tell the operator when you press this button, what's going to happen, which screen going to open, right? So that's where you can see here, you set type into switch and PL or whatever you want to go, right? So that's the caption. And then not only that, you need to set up the real action is where you need to go to the display. Yeah, sorry, this one, display under the settings here. Right, that's the arrow point to here. So if you go to the general tab, right, the section called the display settings, and then over here, that's where you need to click this button to browse all the display names, right? So over here in this particular application, there's only 2 of them. One is called main, the other one called switch and PL, right? Right now you are in main. You can see here you are in main. Then you need to use a go to display button to open the one next to the main, right? Similar to the JSR in the PLC, right? Like from your main routine, you call subroutine, right? That's very easy to understand that. Okay, so now we moved into a numerical component now, right? So with this part, again, remember that you can also select the objects from the menu, right? Underneath the objects, if you go to the category called numerical and string, you will have 3 objects associated with numerical and 2 of them with string. String is not within this course scope. Maybe we can talk about later, right? So the 3 objects associated with numerical is that display, input enable, and there's another one, third one. We'll focus on the first 2, right? The first one is display. If you follow the arrow, so on the HMI, it just shows similar. You may see that's like a very, very similar shape or appearance with the multi-state indicator. But this object is different. It's different from multi-state indicator. It's just used to present the numbers in the PLC, right? So you can see those are the three numbers. You can browse into the PLC memory. And then on the left-hand side, that's the second object. So the first object is a display. It's like output to show the numbers from the PLC. On the left-hand side, those are the two buttons. They are input, right? They call input enable. So that means when you press one of these buttons, you will see a keypad pop up. So from this keypad, you can punch in the numbers. In this way, you can input numbers into PLC, right? So for example, on the next slide, you can see here, again, we haven't talked about the double integer instruction yet, but this instruction is pretty straightforward, very easy to understand. It's a ADD, addition instruction. So you have source A, source B, and destination. So the instruction itself will get the sum of source A and source B, right? They are associated with two PLC tags. One is called value A, the other one is called value B. All right, so remember that those are the two objects we just talked about, right? On the left-hand side, it's what we call numerical input enable. On the right-hand side is the display, right? So how do we set up these two objects? So we want to connect both objects into the same tag. So you can see here, if you open that property window from the input enable, you will see a tab called connections. So you need to connect to this double integer tag on here. And you need to do the same thing for the display, right? Connect to the value A. All right, so there's one thing I don't like the Rockwell design with this part of the software. I don't know why they want to have a polarity. I can see there's some situation you do need to set up a polarity connection, but in most cases you don't need that, because once you set up the value, the polarity, that means if it's a negative value, right? So with negative value, it's built in with the PLC tag, right? You don't have to set up polarity, right? But lots students, when you get this stage, you just get used to the buttons and multi-state indicators. You just lots of people easily set up this polarity with the same tag, but actually that's a mistake. You shouldn't set up that, right? It's polarity is just for you to have a complicated situation. You want to override the polarity of the built-in number. I can show you in a moment. All right, so let's look at the demo. All right, let me see next. Oh, we'll look at the next one later. So let me demonstrate that. All right, so again, we have the value A double integer tag in the PLC, right? So now I can just use I need to stop display, right? Stop display, then I start to look for the numbers here. I think that, yeah, this is, you can see here, they are, you can always, if you click object, you can select one here, right? Display and input enable. If you are not familiar with the icon, right? Let's just take this way. So that, like right now, I can choose the numerical input enable, right? So I choose this object, and then I can start to draw this button on here. So once I finish this object, the window pop up, right? So first thing I want to connect to the tag, right? Remember that? So I can connect to the value A. So that's what I want to connect to. Then for label, I'll just type in the tag name down here. All right, so then we know which one is which one. All right, so click OK. So that's done. right? So now if you start to test display, you can use this object right away. So now, right now, you can see here, the value is 10. So if you click on here, that's the keypad, right? The keypad pop up, current value is 10. I can set up 1, enter, right? So now you can see here, there's some delay, all right? So the value is 1 now, right? If you remember the same time, the multi-state indicator I used to demonstrate the tic-tac-toe, it changed color to red that match up the value, right? Remember that, right? So of course you can change it to value 0 if you want. Value 0 is clear to 0, that also color change. Not necessarily work together, or it just for now I just want to demo this object, right? For now, like you can type in any number, right? So 147, right? You will see error on here, but anyway, you change the value, right? So remember that you can also type in negative, for example, -5 on here, right? So you will see in this situation, you will see on here, there's a red color on here, right? There's a red color because this is invalid for now, because you can see underneath here, it gave you the scope from 0 to 2 million. It's a big number, right? So that's the number, the scope, right? It doesn't allow the negative number in there, right? So for that, we have to go back to set up the property on this object, because the property window, there's a one tab called numeric. All right, so I didn't set up this before, right? So you can see the minimum value, the default is 0, right? Maximum is here. So if you want to include negative number, you have to set up here. For example, I can allow this number go to as low as -100, right? So click OK, then you can quickly test display again. So now for this time, if you type in -5, there's no red color here, right? When you press enter, it accepts the value, right? So now the value A is -5 now. All right. So this is the test. This is the test for the numerical input. So now we can create a display, right? So this is input. The display is this, I think, yeah, that's the icon for this. So if we start to draw this one, right, because with the HMI, you don't have if you don't have a computer, there's no way for you to read the value on the Studio 5000, right? So that's why you need to have another object as output to display the value. So for this one, we want to point to the same value A on here. All right. So this is something probably you run into similar for what I have right now in the lab, right? So in tag browser, if you double click the tag name, it doesn't change the value, right? It stays there. It's almost like it's frozen, right? So in that situation, you just need to click on some other software. Like over here, I click on the Studio 5000. It's just, I think it's a bug from the software. If I switch to this window on the Studio 5000, then come back, then I can click value A again. So it's almost like a wake up the tag browser. So now you can see this one set up the value A, right? Again, I think this is just a software problem with their design, all right? So with this, I don't need to set up anything, right? So if I click OK and then test my display, so you can see the number is a little bit small, right? So I can set up here. If you want to have a bigger number on the numbers, that's set up 18, click OK. Yeah, so that's definitely easier to see. Now it's -5, right? So now if you see 7, 8, 9, you can see here, all right, from HMI, you can see the value right away, right? You don't need to go into PLC. Of course, PLC is 7, 8, 9, right? So that's where you set up. Okay, so all right, so let me do another pair, right? Value B, right? So in this way, you can see the demonstration again. So to do that, I can also do the other way to do it, all right? So because I already have both created, right? I can even later on, maybe I can show you on this. You can highlight both of them if you Control C, and then it's just like the Microsoft Word, right? You can Control V, then you will have the two objects set up right away. And not set up, you create them right away, right? So it's just a different way you can do that, all right? So, all right, so for this one, we want show that value B. All right, so, and of course the connection, we need to change that from, even for this, all right, so I can show you another way. So yeah, you can see the, it was frozen again, all right? So the other way I can show you on here, right? Because you know, if you want connect to value B, you can directly click on here and type in this. You don't have to every time browse it, right? When you apply, so that as long as you type in the right name, so I want to connect to value B, right? So as long as you type in the right name, you don't have to use this button to browse it, right? Especially when there's a problem, you always have the frozen window on there, right? So you can, like I said on here, you can remove A and B. In this way, you don't have the frozen problem, right? So now we have two numbers on here, right? So also I can Control C and Control V to create another display as the sum, right? So for this one, I can connect to the tag name called sum, right? So for this one, I'm gonna to browse that. Yeah, this one, this time work for me, all right? So let's run that, right? So it's like a simple addition, right? It's like a little bit of calculator, right? So you can see here, 789 plus 0 equals this, all right? If I add 1 on the value B, and then that's supposed to, yeah, you can see here, I calculate 790, all right? So because, where is the, over here, right? So this is the instruction on the PLC, right? You add two numbers together. Okay, so notice, I don't know if you notice on the difference on value B, you can see here, value B, it has a decimal point, same thing for the sum, right? That because I create those two tags in different type. So if I move my cursor on here, you can see value A, the data type, right? The tooltip, it shows DIN, right? You notice that? So if I highlight my value B, you can see the data type is called real. So we'll talk about more on the PLC instruction. So real is the data type you want include decimal numbers, right? So same thing for sum, right? So you can see that's also real, right? So that means for value B, I can type in the decimal numbers. So for example, if I want to type in 1.2, right? So you can see 1.2, then let's see what happened. All right. So clearly you can see the PLC take it, right? PLC take it on here on value B on the PLC, it read 1.2 from the blue arrow, right? That which means the real value, real time. But on the HMI, it shows 1. Right? Same thing for the sum. It's also only shows 790, right? But actually on the PLC, it's 790.2, right? It got something you lost on here, right? The PLC accepted, but on the HMI, you didn't set up the property correspond to that. So that's where we need to look at here. If you look at this property again, so you need come back to the display on the general here. So if you go down here, you will have a number of digits, right? And also decimal places right now is 0, right? So if we want to have one decimal point, you need to set up as a 1, right? So that's, I believe that's the simple fix. Yeah, when you click, you can see here, it gave you the format. You will have a 3 digit on the whole number, and then the decimal point occupy 1 place, then followed by 1 digit on the decimal points, right? So same thing, we can do that on the sum, right? So if, for example, you can also set up 2 decimal place if no, better not, because we have the number in there, right? So that's 1 over here, and then that's test it, right? So you can see here, once you set up the property correctly, you get the real PLC numbers show up on the HMI. All right, so this is just some, again, with HMI, you don't have to program, you don't have to do the logic, but it's just a lot of properties, features, and attributes you needed to know where to set up, right? So that I hope this demo makes sense to you with the numbers. On this one, I think this is okay. Yeah. So let's talk about the third component. Remember that if you go to objects, the first 2 we already talked about. One is display, the other one is input enable. The third one is called input cursor point. It's a long name, it's a weird name. As you can see here, it's just a combination. They combine the previous 2. So with one object, you can also have the value represent the input. Then also the display, you see over here, you can use one object instead of 2. You can have one object to do the 2 objects, say. But you know, even with only one object, you still need some of the label. You can see here, right? With like this text object, you need that operator know what this object associated with, right? So that's why I put it into advanced, and I don't recommend you do this first, but we can try it anyway. We can try it anyway. So I'm going to show that this object, right? So numerical input cursor point. So this is a separate object. So if you draw the object on here, you will see different settings under this the connections. So for this, you need connect to the value A and also on the indicator. So they have a lot of the other parts on here. You don't have to set up on that, all right? So it's just it's frozen again, all right? So it's just a actual. If you're interested, you can read the menu, but for basic, you only need to set up these 2, right? So once I click OK here, and then if I test that, so that's associated with value A, the same value, right? As you can see here, when I click on this object, I can also input from here. It's a combination of both, right? So you can see I change that to 1, 2, 3, right? Everybody understand? So it's just, but of course, if you only have one object here, the operator doesn't know what's this one for, right? You obviously need to create a text object, right, to show that, right? So that's one thing you need to make sure on that. Yeah, okay, yeah. I think I forgot to demonstrate the other thing. So remember that when the numerical display, I mentioned that the polarity is unnecessary. Lots people made a mistake here. For example, if you didn't pay attention, you set up value A here. It's frozen again. Click on here. Yeah, so it take it, right? So you can see I shouldn't set up polarity, but I set up this as the same, right? So let's see what happened, all right? So if I set up that, then you can see on here, that's what is wrong. You can see here, right? It's negative 123, but actually inside PLC it's positive 123. Right? The reason is that you can read on the manual if you want to know the details. All right. So it's sometimes you in some situation you may want to override the positive and negative sign on the number. If that's the case, you want to set up, but I doubt it. That's sometimes that's a very, very rare situation, right? So that's why you need to remember, right? The polarity leave to blank. Otherwise, you will very likely get a negative number to display on there all the time, right? So for details, you can read the manual. Basically, it's just like a sort of override. On here, I think I demonstrate minimum and maximum, right? And also the decimal point, right? You can just choose accept in place. Yeah, that means you can type in the numbers, right? So you can just accept this default, right? And then that's where you set up the how many decimal point you want to display, right? This over here, I give you another example, right? As you can see here, right? So this one has a lot of decimal numbers, decimal places, right? And then if you want to demonstrate the numbers on here, like right now, you set up number of digits 5, decimal places 3, right? So you can see after decimal point, there's only 3 digits, right? So but if you look at the number on here, it's 2.5806, right? Because the number 4th place is 6. That's being rounded up into the, you only ask for 3 decimal points, right? So the last one will be rounded up if it's bigger than 5. Right, so that's why you can see there's a little bit difference between these two, right? It's after decimal point is 581, but the number in the PLC is after decimal is 580, but the next one is 6, is being rounded up. All right, so this is what's the difference on the display. Okay, so I think I have a little bit time to demonstrate the animation. All right, so animation is another feature you can associate with graphic objects. All right, so you can read on this later on. All right, so I'll just quickly demonstrate. So first, what kind of animation you can set up? All right, so if you right-click the object, mostly the drawing object, if you choose the animation on the right hand side, as you can see, you have 10 different options. You can set up the animation on visibility, color, feel, all kinds of other things. All right. So what's the animation for? That can add more features to your HMI design. All right, let's look at here. So if you open the configuration window, like we look at on the before, you have so many features you can set up. Like right now, we're setting up the color, right? You set up a tag and set up different colors to show up, depends on the value, right? If you remember, that's almost identical with the multi-state indicator, right? Of course, you can use the multi-state indicator to do that. But there's another thing with the animation you can do is called visibility, right? There's not 10, there are 12 actually, 12 of them you can set up. One of them, one of the features is called visibility. I can demonstrate that very quickly. All right, and also other animation you can also set up, right? So I believe that's last slide. Yeah. So now I can start to set up some of the animations here. So for example, all right, I'll just use the PLC on here. So let me see here. Let's just say if I create a text object. So if I want to monitor the value of the value A, so whenever that greater than 5, I want that show up. All right. So as you can see here, this object I can make it bigger. So this is just a simple object, right? So maybe put on here, right? So greater than 5, right? So if I don't set up animation, whenever I touch display, it just show up, right? Even though if I, for example, I type in 2, right? 2 is less than 5, but it still show up because there's no animation associated with, right? So now if I right click this object, I can choose animation. Right? It's being cut off from your screen. I'll just move to here, right? So then that's you to look at the whole. So right click, you will see animation. With animation, you can see the first one is called visibility. If you click on the visibility, there's a window pop up. All right. So with this, you can set up a expression, right? So for example, I can set up this, monitor the value A. When value A, you can use relation greater than 5, right? I'll do what it says on here, right? Whenever this value A greater than 5, click OK. So you can see here, there's an expression. So then underneath here, you can see expression true states. So this object will become visible when this expression is true. So you can start to see some of the logic you can build in with HMI, right? So this is something you can compare. When you only show this object when the list tag value is greater than 5. Of course, you can choose the offset, right? But in this situation, I want use visible. All right, so I finish this, then I can start to test. So right now you can see the value is 2, right? That object over here is invisible, right? But if I type in 6, right? When I change it to 6, that expression become true. Then this object show up, right? You see the application. So there's some situation you don't want to be visible, right? But in some situation you want to be visible. In that situation, you can set up this animation. All right. All right. So if you need to leave, you can leave now. I think I have a little bit time. I'd like to show a different animation, right? I'm gonna do a very quickly animation on this one for a very, I think it's very cool one, right? So animation, you mean mostly that means that you want to see some movement, right? So now I'm just doing a circle, right? So I can set up the animation on this circle with different positions. So you can see here, there are 12 of them. One of them is called horizontal position. All right. So I can set up this circle position to reflect on the value A. Depends on the value of A, value A's value, I can let the object to have different positions. Frozen again. Value A, right? You can see here, I choose this, right? So for this, right now you can see the minimum, the pixel value is 0. I want to use that as a minimum. I check this minimum, right? Then I can start to click this object to drag it, to, for example, I want to move from the letter M to N, right, to this offset, right? So you can see here, it shows currently the pixel number is 107. I can check on maximum, and then the maximum value over here, I can set up 107 and click apply and close that. So then this object has the animation associated with this tag value. So for example, all right, let's give a big number, 77. See that? You can see, yeah, you can see this position, the position of this object change, right? So if I enter 0, that's to go back to here, line up with letter M, right? So if I type in 0, you can see that goes back to here, right? If you type in 107, which is maximum, that goes to the N, like on here, right? So you can see this is something very fancy. If you're interested, you can look into. All right. Of course, there are also other applications. In the following lecture, if I have time, maybe we can have more discussion about that. All right. So, okay. So.